Other best practices. Before we finish, I would like to share some other best practices. Sometimes we can go to other websites, other places to look for more best practices. So here I've added several YouTube videos that are very interesting that have also helped me a lot when I've been building applications in the platform. For example, here there's a video talking about color, layout, composition, typography, images. Besides, we've added several links so you can use them to download fonts, for example. So there's some useful help here in the presentation. It would be interesting to maybe spend a few minutes and watch some of these videos, or even look online and find more information about how to create emails, forms, etc. Another thing I'd like to say is lots of times when I've seen people building applications, they're not really using the icons correctly. So I would like to mention this as another best practice. Here we have an example of someone who's using several icons. We can see they're all of the same type. The size is the same. The interface or the look and feel is also the same. We can see the thin outer part of the image, it's always the same. We can also see it's the same thickness. We can see it's the same color. But here we can see someone who's using the icons incorrectly because they're mixing different patterns, different designs. Here we can see they're using an icon with a shade. Here they're using a colorful icon. Here we can see they're using a solid icon. Here they're using an icon which has a much thinner outline. So we're not really supposed to do this unless we're really, really good at arts and we're really good at this. Then we might be able to mix and match things. But if we're not, we're just going to keep it simple. We're just going to try to do things following these best practices, and that should have us ready to go. We can also see here that we have several icons that are being used in this interface, and we can clearly see that one of these icons doesn't match. It's obviously this one here. It has much more weight. It's a solid icon. All of these are linear icons. So what this does, it really makes the user have a worse experience, or maybe it's making them focus more on one of the icons instead of all of them. We want them all to have the same weight. We also want them to have some space around them. We don't want to use icons that are too small, because then maybe if it's a clickable icon, it's way too small for the user to click on. Or if they need to see it, maybe the graphical information that we're displaying is way too little, so it really looks like an ant, or you don't really know what you're seeing. So it's important also to make them big enough. Some other best practices related to buttons are creating buttons that actually look like buttons. Sometimes I've seen forms where I really can't tell if something is it's a label, a button, or a title, because they all look the same. So we have to make our buttons really look like buttons. We also have to make them different. We have to make sure the primary buttons, the call to action button, is always highlighted and it really calls for your attention. And the secondary buttons should have less contrast, like we can see here. Besides, we should always position them logically. So if we're going to be reading from left to right, and for example, we have a form with several steps and we want the user to go next or go back, it makes more sense to put the next button here on this side. Besides, the back button would probably be the secondary button with less contrast, and the next button would probably be the call to action button, where you really want the user to focus his attention on. So we have to make sure to use logical colors. Here we can see the sign up button is red. That's calling for danger, or it's making the user probably they're not going to want to click on it because it's red. Instead, we have the delete button in color green. This is really annoying because it would make the user first read this or try to click here. So we have to be careful with the colors and what we're transmitting with these colors. We don't want to use too many buttons. This is really confusing. So we have to be careful with this. We also want to use short labels, or labels are very clear and concise. Here we can see an example where it says, do you want to quit the game? And first I have okay. I also want it to be saved. And then I have yes, even if I lose my progress. When I'm here, I don't really know what the question was anymore. It's too much text. It's really confusing. This one isn't perfect either, but maybe it's a little bit better because the answers are shorter. So do you want to quit the game, save and exit without saving, or no? Well, this would be a little bit better. And as I mentioned before, we have to be very careful with the size of the buttons. Exercise 401, Part 5. Thank you for your attention.